Hello viewers, welcome to Candid Conversations with Ganesh Kuppala. You have heard me speaking to various business leaders, social impact leaders on my show. Today I'm really excited because the subject that we are going to talk about today is very close to my heart. Everyone is speaking about mental health, cognitive health, brain health, all that stuff as a jargons in the current working world. So I thought I should bring somebody who's expert in this space. So I have Naomi with me today, who's Applied Neuroscientist. That sounds exciting. And she did a lot of work in the brain health space. So let me welcome Naomi, and I would probably talk about all your work in the conversation today. But why don't we start with your quick introduction, Naomi, and then let's get into the conversation.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here. And I suppose for me, the background is just that I got super excited about the brain, forever. So I was excited about it when I was when I was studying at university. Mm-hmm. I was always interested in what makes people behave the way that they do and what changes people's behaviour. But I got particularly interested. I had panic attacks and anxiety things as a kid.
Wow.
And I think that was one of the things that really caused an interest for me. And then later, about 15 years ago, my two people very close to me were experiencing similar sorts of problems. So that's they were having memory problems, they were very frustrated, they were experiencing difficulties just coping with everyday life.
Okay.
And what I realised was that there was a real similarity between the sorts of challenges that they were having, and yet one was in their 70s and the other one was about 7.
Wow.
And so there was a sort of, for me, trying to understand what was going on and why were these symptoms so similar. My father ended up being diagnosed with Alzheimer's, sadly.
Okay.
My daughter ended up being diagnosed with dyslexia, dyscalculia, and later with ADHD. And it really struck me how similar those challenges can be for people when it's affecting mental health, cognitive health, and brain health. So
That's how it started. Yeah, I know, amazing. That's a brilliant story actually. So the way you started is coming from your personal experiences, and then you looked at people around you, friends, family, and you mentioned about 70 versus 7. That's an amazing analogy. I mean, I'll probably want to go deep into it, but before a deep dive, you started with the finance. You were at Bank of New York, and then you moved into neurosciences, studying brain and all that stuff, which is amazing story. But my question to you, Naomi, is, was there any trigger for you at the workplace at any time you thought people were behaving such a way that there is probably not a reason through the intentions, but mostly actions, but they were not driven by that? I mean, is there any trigger for you, like from the workplace, if I have to understand? I understand your personal story, but how about the workplace stories?
For moving into neuroscience?
Yeah.
For me, it was predominantly when I had my daughter, and I was working at that stage. So I started in finance. I was working in technology projects in IT, and I gradually got more and more interested in working with people, and so I ended up doing much more in terms of training and development, learning and development, and that was a very, very engaging place to be. But I was really struck in the workplace because at that time there wasn't very much focus on what was called soft skills. They were somehow seemed to be less important. So the focus was very much on, we should teach people how to use the systems, we should teach people about upgrades, we should teach people about money laundering. And these very hard things, described as the hard things, but the softer skills were somehow dismissed. And I went away and I trained as a coach in my own time because I thought it was really important, an important skill to learn. And I went back to the workplace, went back to the bank and said, I'm really interested in using these coaching skills. And in the end they said, well, can you go and work with a senior business team? So I went and did some work with one. And there was one in particular who ran a team, and the staff there were persistently leaving, persistently unhappy, persistently going to HR and very, very stressed. There was a lot of absenteeism. And he asked me to work with that particular manager, and we looked at some of the things that were going on in the team, and none of it was deliberate. It was completely inadvertent. The way he would speak to the staff would make them feel terrified, make them feel threatened, make them feel worried. And so they weren't working so well, they weren't sleeping so well, they weren't coping so well. And we just did a few sessions, but at the end of the beginning of the first session, he said, I'm really not interested in doing any of this coaching stuff. And I said, I totally understand that. Let's just have a conversation. And at the end of that first hour, he said, that's the most valuable hour I've ever spent.
Makes sense.
I think that says a lot about what things like coaching and training can do.
Yeah, and a lot of times it's I'm in the workplace for 2 decades as well, like yourself, Naomi. And what we as leaders, once you get into the people leadership roles and all, sometimes we kind of bogged up into all this kind of targets or all that stuff. You probably end up not spending a lot of time on where you have to. And I completely understand why he would have said that, that 1 hour is such an extremely important one, because at times leaders tend to forget, while they do focus on people, but they tend to forget that softer aspect of the world where people might be going through various things. You never know what's happening in their lives. Having that chat, like my mentor, one of my mentors used to say, sometimes with no agenda, with nothing in your brain, just go to your team, just say hi, how they're doing. With no targets, no work allocations, or nothing of that sort. Just have a normal conversation. Try how it works. And it is extremely impactful, right? How do you think the mental health, for example, I mean, it's a buzzword today, everyone speaks about it and all, but if you have to define in a normal way for any person to understand, what is the grade of mental health any individual generally will have at a workplace if they're in a stressed environment? What drives the mental health? And what is the difference between this cognitive mental health and all that stuff? Because all this sounds...
Questions.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Okay, well, perhaps it's easier if I start by defining those two and separating them out, because I think one of the questions I get asked a lot is about, well, you talk about cognitive health, what actually is cognitive health and how is it different?
Yeah.
And mental health, people are much more comfortable with. So we talk about, if somebody is struggling with anxiety or depression, then that would typically be, people would recognize that was a mental health concern. What they tend not to think about is things like cognitive health concerns, which are how you focus, how you think, you plan, you make decisions. So cognitive health is that ability to use the executive function, which is predominantly at the front of your brain, for running your world, running your everyday life, running your brain, and not doing the impulsive things. And so if somebody is struggling with their cognitive health, then the sorts of things you might see are brain fog, memory lapses, difficulty concentrating, difficulty to stay focused on one thing. Those are more of a difficulty in planning. Decision making goes out of the window. They get this kind of decision paralysis, if you like, where they can't make a decision. So all of these things are cognitive health concerns, and then I talk about broader brain health, but I think we're going to cover.
Understand, but let me ask you an interesting question here, right? I heard some of my team members say sometimes we go blank. What does it mean actually? So why do people go blank? I mean, you're extremely busy, you're on very intensive task, and all of a sudden your brain stops functioning. It says nothing to you and you go blank. What does it mean actually?
It's very interesting, isn't it? And this is what often people describe as brain fog.
Okay.
So brain fog, going blank, losing words, reaching for a word and it not being there. This is just a sign that your brain is not functioning as well as it should be. And so often it's a sign that you haven't slept very well,
okay,
or you're really worried about something else. So if you've got, for example, a really high cognitive load, which is to say you're thinking about a lot of different things, and then you try and focus on the one thing, like which might be a conversation or it might be solving a problem, and your brain is so busy processing other things that the one thing you wanted to do, it's finding it very hard to do. So there's a limit, there's a capacity, a limit to how many things your brain can do at once.
Yeah. But does brain, what drives the brain and when that happens? Like, you get my point, right? I mean, we are in the middle of a conversation now. All of a sudden, my mind stops working. But I know I'm focused on this conversation. I know I'm thinking about this. But how do the shift drives from the brain? What happens?
Well,
I want to understand this very clearly because it happens with you, me, everyone, right?
Yeah, I think the thing with the brain is it's a really new area of research, and so we've discovered more about the brain in the last 5 years than the previous 200 probably.
Oh, that's interesting.
It's absolutely rocketed, but it's only in very, very recent years that we've been able to see what's going on in the behaving brain. So be able to scan a brain while it's doing something, while somebody's alive and kicking and doing something. So it's really very new that we've been able to do any research in this area at all. The research is coming out very quickly, which is why my job's super exciting.
Yeah.
But it is still very new. One of the things that we do know is that in some cases, brain fog is caused by, it's like a lack of energy in the brain. So all of a sudden the energy levels drop. And that can be to do with, that's associated with long COVID in some cases. It's certainly associated with menopause. And so the brain is just not able to make use of the energy that you've got in your body. Or it might be that you're a bit depleted anyway. So your brain is an energy hungry organ.
That's interesting. So that's interesting because I have seen, again, this is one of the most recent, very popular topics, post-COVID symptoms, right? I mean, what happened and all that stuff. Especially what I was hearing is the children who were born after 2019, 2020. And I don't know, I mean, you have to validate this, but some of my friends came back and said, like, they speak a little later, unusually. And like, if a kid speaks at like 13th month in general, 14th month of life, but now the kids are taking more time. Is there any link between the COVID and how the brain is functioning post-COVID?
Yeah, absolutely. I remember being in a meeting with a head teacher and we were talking about the behaviour of children and how development had been affected, even the children who were older at the time that COVID hit. And I remember him saying, well, how long can we carry on blaming COVID? And my answer was, well, forever, really. Because
is that true?
Because it's changed our brains. Our brains are constantly changing.
Wow.
And it's not a case of blaming COVID so much as recognizing that COVID was a major factor in how brains were shaped at that time.
Wow.
And that's not to say that there's nothing we can do. There are loads of things that we could be doing to help support brain development and keep, and strengthen brains. But there is a huge impact from spending so much time isolated. So we know that there has been there's shrinkage seen in the brain, and I think in some of the studies it looked like about 10 to 20 years worth of brain reduction.
Wow.
Just seen from the result of COVID. So
20 to 30 years.
10 to 20 years of brain reduction seen, so the sorts of brain changes that you would
That's
expect.
Scary, Naomi.
Yes, frightening, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
But so in older people, that's so you expect tiny changes, you expect little reductions in volume, but big change over a short period. And so and there's lots of research to suggest that people who've had long COVID, who've had really bad bouts of COVID, have struggled much more with brain fog.
Oh.
But also, even people who didn't have COVID or didn't realise that they had COVID, just the sense of isolation, being apart from people, has affected their brain. So brains are not functioning as well as they
That makes a
were
lot of
before.
sense. I'll tell you a personal story, right?
Yes.
During COVID, I was in Saudi Arabia. I was working with Deloitte Middle East as a senior manager. I moved to Saudi Arabia just before COVID, 2019, and like few weeks into Saudi Arabia, you know how Middle East culture is, right? I mean, it's big houses and all that stuff. I was put in a lavish hotel working for Deloitte, but what happened is like 2 weeks after I joined Deloitte, COVID hit, and I couldn't get out of the hotel, and I was 3 to 4 months actually in one hotel room with the purple curtains all around me, working every day, but most of the color, like 80% of my day, I would have looked at purple as a color, right? And I mean, the only people I would have seen with the masks were the people who were catering me, the hotel people who were coming and giving me the food, because it's a COVID, everyone is scared of, like wave one I'm talking about. After the 4 months, when I was able to get out of, because I was not allowed to get out of the hotel, it's Saudi Arabia, strict rules, you cannot go out because you've been served already by the hotel management. So what is the need of going out, right? So they asked me, I mean, if I have to ask, like, I need to go and pick groceries and all, I mean, you've been served by the hotel, so you shouldn't go out. Because I was a foreign national, you know what I'm talking about. It's a typical situation. After 4 months, when I got out for the first time, it was such a scary situation. I was not able to, function the way how people look. Everyone was looking extremely different to me because I've not seen people, and all the colors were looking different to me. So what do you think the situation of the brain then? Like, do brain functions, because you talked about isolation, COVID and all that stuff, I can relate to it because your brain functions the way you feed in. It's almost like AI, right? I mean, the data you feed in,
Yes.
the brain, AI works in the same way.
Yeah, great analogy.
So similarly, your brain is fed with some data through your experiences and all. So how do you reflect on this, my scenario and overall
I
situations?
think that's fascinating. I mean, I can't imagine. That must have been so hard.
It's very hard.
It must have been so hard. It must have felt like a prison.
Yeah, it was.
And how were you feeling at the time? Like, did you feel threatened? Did you feel how?
See, I was more conscious because I'm a family man. I have two kids. They were in India. I'm alone, isolated, obviously, in Saudi Arabia. I was supposed to bring my kids to Saudi Arabia, but it didn't happen because of all these restrictions and all, right? So I was keeping myself extremely busy with the work because I don't know what to do. So I ended up working more hours because I want to occupy my brain, because at least I had an alternative that worked. But apart from when I was not working, I spent a lot of time reading and all that stuff through online. But yeah, every day I was feeling more lonely than ever.
Yeah.
So there is being alone is one element of it, but feeling lonely is another element. That's what my feeling was. But I could manage it. I came up really strong out of that, so it didn't affect me in any way. But the bigger effect that I had was how I look at the situations in general, and gratitude towards what we have. All that stuff has changed. But when it comes to brain in specific, my mind started reacting much faster afterwards. I don't know why. So I probably will ask you. You are a neuroscientist. You should tell me. Is it like I was prepared more for the odds? I don't know.
So when you say it was reacting faster, what do you mean faster?
So when I came out, I'll tell you quickly, right? Once I come out of, because I've seen purple as color only for some time, right? Once I came out after 4 months, I would look at any board, I can recognize colors. There's green, yellow, which I don't do normally. You getting my point?
Yes.
In my regular life, I would have not noticed colors.
Yeah.
I would have not cared about colors. I'm here. Okay, there's green, there's white, there's yellow. That is happening with me now. Post that. I would have never done it like 35 years before COVID. But post-COVID, once that I had situation, I started looking at the colors without even knowingly. So my brain functions super fast now, recognize things very quickly.
Did you stop noticing purple so much?
I did actually.
It's so interesting, isn't it? So the brain is primed to keep you safe. I mean, its whole job is to keep you safe, keep you alive, ideally to the point that you're able to reproduce. That's its job.
Yeah.
And so our brains are not trained for the sorts of worlds and the cultures that we live in now. They're trained over generations and generations to keep us alive and enable us to catch prey and avoid predators. And so typically when your brain is working as you described, it's taking up all the information from all of your senses and then trying to make sense of it. It's a black box. It's no idea what's going on in the world. It's just having to make sense of it based on all of the sensations that you're receiving. And so the sensations that you were receiving in the hotel room are, it's purple. It's mostly purple. There's not a lot going on. I'm not getting to see anybody. And that will have been kind of affected by, were you feeling safe there, or were you feeling threatened there, or were you feeling lonely there? And you described feeling lonely. We know that loneliness is a risk factor for dementia, for example. So social connection is what we're designed for. And so being in a situation where all of a sudden you can't have any social connections, and that social connections are somehow now related to danger, that you might catch a virus if you have social connections. This is why we're seeing so many people now finding it very, very hard to go back into workplaces. Because they, like you, had a big experience where they had to be isolated for their own safety or for the safety of others. And so your brain is now, all of a sudden, it's noticing all of the things that it's not used to seeing. It tends to notice things that you're not used to seeing much more than things that you are used to seeing.
So true.
And particularly if it relates to danger. I mean, people talk about the amygdala, which is that part of the brain which a lot of people describe as the fear center of the brain. It's not just for fear, it's for anything that's kind of salient. It's anything that's really useful. And so for you, all of the colour was suddenly useful, interesting, curious making.
Interesting. And the other question I had, Naomi, I want you to deep dive into this, okay, this topic. But you would have seen Adolescence for sure.
Oh, sorry?
Adolescence, the Netflix series Adolescence.
Oh, I actually haven't seen it.
Oh, you haven't? Okay.
No, I haven't seen it.
Okay. Where's it? Where a teen boy, the story, I'll tell you. So, he's an amazing child, normal child, who grows up until 13, very normal child. And all of a sudden something happens. He gets into this unfortunate situation. Driven by him, obviously, and he kills somebody and all that stuff, right? So when I saw that, I was a bit scared, primarily because, I'll tell you the background. So most of I'm sure you're a neuroscientist, you read the brain and all, but criminology is one of the side of it, right? One topic. A person who attempts or happens to do some crime, until then he was a normal person, he does crime, and then he becomes a normal person again. So what happens in the brain? I always wanted to ask somebody who's specialist in this space. What happens when that incident happens? What is actually driving that unusual, unwanted thing happening from that same person who's very normal until yesterday, even normal after the incident? So what happens? Is there something coming out from somewhere else, or
it's something that there is a lot of emerging research in prison populations. I did some work in a prison, and it was absolutely fascinating. But for example, there was a person there who had a perfectly normal life, but he was in prison for having been an arsonist. So he was setting fires to things. And I asked him, was there a trigger? Was there something that happened? He fell off a roof, damaged his brain very badly.
Oh, okay.
And this is something that's very common, that people don't realise just how impactful the brain is or how important it is to look after it. Because even a small thing like a small concussion can change the way that our brain functions. It can change, a bigger impact, can change our personality completely. It changes our behaviours. It can make people more impulsive, so they would do something or say something that they wouldn't normally do. And so typically what we find is that if somebody has done something really unusual or they've really changed, it's because of a head knock or and it might not even be something that they perceive, or it can be medication related, just tiny triggers that can make a really big difference. It's why I emphasise on telling people how important it is to look after their brain.
Very interesting. And that, I probably dive into now women and workplace, or not at the workplace, irrespective. Because what I noticed, as like I'm a family man, my wife and daughter speak about, we do speak about women in general at home, right? So there are days in a month where women feel unusually stressed. For some reason, I don't understand women as much as you do. So if you can explain me why that happens, like especially the menstrual period times, those 3-4 days, or what should workplaces be more prepared for those days, because their emotions are different. Are there any reasons for it, and how should the workplaces, if you can talk about that in a little more detail?
Yeah. So I'm going to talk sort of about hormones generally, if that's okay, because it's not just during the menstrual period. And again, the research is super new. So it was only about a year or so ago, possibly 2 years at the most, that we first started seeing research on that tracked brains during a menstrual cycle. It's really new, and the same during menopause. But we now know that the female brain changes, it adapts remarkably right the way through. So it adapts and changes during the month in reaction to the different hormone changes that we have. It reacts again in pregnancy, so it changes so dramatically in pregnancy that you can see on brain scans, they could tell the difference between women who had been pregnant and those who had not been pregnant just from brain scans. So the brain is changing, the structure of the brain changes, chemicals change, and then again in menopause. And so it's not, and then again we have this sort of higher risk factor for cognitive decline later. So if you look at Alzheimer's patients, for example, 2 out of 3 of them are women, and nobody is quite sure why. Historically, it was very much dismissed as, women live longer, and dementia is an aging disease, and therefore it's natural, of course women are going to get it more than men. And it's taken a lot of fight from neuroscientists like Lisa Mosconi, who have spent a lot of time and money, a lot of time raising the money to do the actual research. And now they do brain scans, and they can see brain changes in our 30s, in our 40s, in our 50s, in response to menopause, in response to hormonal changes, because the brain runs off estrogen. So the brain is using estrogen in order to make energy. And when estrogen, this kind of key female hormone, fluctuates, then less energy is created. You can't get brain energy in the same way as you would normally.
Does it drive more anger, or what happens? So I heard this word a lot, mood swings is what we call it as, right? And I've at least noticed home or like workplaces at times. Let's talk about women first, then we'll come to men, because there's a mental health aspect for the men as well. But especially focusing on women, when this particular periods happens, or the hormonal changes or mood swings, whatever you call it as, is it more driven towards emotionally more dependent, or is it more anger, assertiveness becomes more? How does this function? When you talk about you just scientifically mentioned various things, what is it like? Is it affects left brain more or right brain? How does this work?
So it's not so much a left brain, right brain thing, and that's kind of there's a lot of neuromyths around left brain, right brain, and people being more left-brained or more right-brained. It's not really a thing. It's a bit like that, the neuromyth that we only use 10% of our brain. That's not true either.
That's not true either. Okay.
And it's a bit like the myth that we have kind of 3 brains and that one of them is a reptile brain. We don't have a reptile brain either.
Okay.
So there are lots of neuromyths out there that have been around for a really long time. You'll still see them in the press. It's not true, and there's no evidence to back any of it up. But people kind of latch onto it. So just to kind of debunk one of the things that I tend to do a lot in my workshops is look at, okay, let's debunk some neuromyths first, so that we're working from a position of what we do know now about the brain, and then what can we do with it. And I think emotional regulation, which you've raised, is so interesting because certainly, and that's what you're talking about with mood swings. What we describe that's really kind of emotional regulation. So it's your ability to regulate your emotions. And historically, it was thought that emotions were kind of built in, hardwired. That if something happens, you're triggered. You have to. It's natural that you will be angry. It's a hard wire to anger. And again, there's no research. They haven't been able to back any of that up. So instead, there's a researcher called Lisa Feldman-Barrett who has done amazing work in the neuroscience of emotions. And she describes it as the way that we learn emotions. And then we create emotions. So when something changes in our body or in the world around us, then our brain is trying to work out what's going on, and it's trying to work out what it might relate to. So our brain will then create an emotion that explains it. So, for example, she gives this brilliant story of going out for dinner with a friend, a sort of slightly romantic dinner. And during the course of the dinner, she starts to get a little bit flushed. She wasn't that keen on the person, but she starts to get a little bit flushed, and her breathing, her heart rate increases, and her breathing increases. And by the end of the dinner, when he asks her, "Would you like to go again?" she thinks, "Well, yes, because clearly I must like him more than I realised." All this. She goes home, promptly throws up, and she's got stomach flu.
Oh.
And what she realised afterwards was that these symptoms of I've got butterflies in my stomach, my heart's racing, I'm getting a little bit flushed. If we're in a romantic situation, we'll interpret it as, oh, I'm feeling a little bit. I'm excited.
Blushing,
this is love. And if we've just had something that's disagreed with us and we know that we're going to be ill, then it's those same things we would describe as flu symptoms. And if we were about to go into an exam and we have, we can feel our stomach and our heart's beating faster and we're flushing, or we're about to go on stage, people will describe that as stage fright or exam anxiety. And if they're about to go on a roller coaster, exactly the same signs again is described as excitement.
Very true.
So emotional regulation is about understanding your emotions and then being able to select an emotion rather than have your body choose one for you. So when I teach emotional intelligence, it's about teaching people how to learn some new emotions, become more granular in your emotions, and to understand that emotions basically happen on a scale of low to high energy and negative to positive. So if you imagine you've got a low energy negative emotion, super low energy, super negative, that would be something like severe depression or even suicidality. Very, very low energy. I just can't.
So how do people recognize this? It's a very important. Sorry to break your flow, but I think it's an extremely important subject to talk about. Thank you so much for bringing that up. So how do people consciously understand this, if they want to, because people talk about depression, anxiety, all these terms, right? I mean, I don't know how many of it really understands what it means, but you rightly mentioned like low in emotion, low in motivation and all that stuff may trigger into even suicidal tendencies and all that stuff. How do people recognize this? Do they need a help from
I don't
side?
think they do, but I do think this is part of why I think that it's so important to educate people about the brain and educate them about. I'm an absolute fanatic for brain health education and brain education generally. People need to understand their brains so that they can work them better. And most people don't know enough about their brains. Most people don't know anything about their brain. They know more about their mobile phone than they do about their brain.
So true.
So what you have, if they're having a high energy emotion that is, then they might interpret, if they're going into an exam, they've got a very high energy sense, then they're likely to interpret it as anxiety or total fear, which is high and very, very negative. So when people tell them to calm down, they say calm down, you've got to imagine then they've got to go from like diametrically
True.
Opposite.
Completely opposite.
Yes,
Yeah.
you've got to know you're very high and very negative, and I want you to go very low energy and very positive.
You'll struggle.
Too big a change.
And you'll struggle as well.
Of course.
It doesn't happen.
You can't. If you tell somebody to calm down, does it ever work? No. People don't calm down when you tell them to calm down. But people somehow, teachers go, "Don't worry, just calm down." No, it doesn't work like that. In order to calm down, we have to realise what our emotions are doing. And in fact, it's actually easier in that situation. If you're going into a situation like an exam, for example, or you're going out on stage, you actually need that high energy. So you don't want to be calmed down. You don't want to be low energy in that sort of situation. It's actually not helpful. It's really helpful to be high energy, and it's much easier to change from high energy negative to high energy positive, because that's a much smaller switch. You're not changing your energy levels, only the kind of valence there.
Very, very interesting. Because I think I can bring an analogy there. I was watching this Grandmasters chess, global tourney, Grandmasters they call it as. So one of the participants is from India, called Gukesh. The other participant is from West. So both of them are Grandmasters. They're extremely intelligent, super high wisdom, all that stuff, right? But when you look at how they function, this guy from India is super calm, taking every step, taking breath, maybe he's extremely excited inside, but he's not showing up at all. Whereas the other person, showing up everything, he's excited. He's making a move, shouting, getting up, walking around. So how do you see this? How important is it to emote out there? Because the reason I'm asking this question, I have a follow-up question as well, but I'll come to that. But I'll tell you so that you know where I'm coming to. People say that, men emote less and women emote very well in most of the situations. And I'm coming from South Asian community. I'm from India. Back home, they say men shouldn't cry. Mard ko dard nahi hota. There's, people who from India, they'll understand. A man should be, keeping a family like is protected. You should not be crying. You should not be coming out weak and all that stuff is what we are fed in from the childhood. So how do you see this? Like now we are moving from women to men and all that stuff, but how important is it to women, for men or women to emote when it is true, right? Two is, how do you see the sports thing? What's your analogy on those two characters?
I think, brilliant question. I think in terms of men emoting, how important it is to have emotions. We all have emotions. Emotions are entirely natural. There are people who understand their emotions more or less, so this thing that we call emotional intelligence, I think is incredibly valuable. Understanding, learning, training to understand your emotions, which is what I sometimes do with leaders, is help them to understand what their emotions are and how they can use them more usefully. and also with women in particular, because their emotions are affected by their hormones, having that greater understanding of them is even more valuable, arguably, because they're more likely to impact you at unexpected times. And so having some strategies is just incredibly helpful. It might be that there's also people who really are not very much in touch with their emotions at all. So some people have something called alexithymia, which is a sense that they're not really understanding their emotions. They can't put their finger on how they're feeling, and so it's much more complicated for them. If somebody asks, "How are you?" it doesn't make sense to them. Like, what are you doing? Makes sense. You know what you're doing.
Yeah.
How are you? It's not.
I don't know.
It doesn't. And so for some people, because people's brains all work differently, unique brains work in unique ways, and all our brains are completely different. Our brains are. The more we understand about them, the better. But culturally, men have been discouraged from showing emotion.
Yeah.
And I think that's really showing up in how much that's affected mental health in men. If you don't show any emotion, if mental health is stigmatized, if emotions are stigmatized in men, it's enormously damaging. It's enormously damaging because then you're having to keep everything down. You don't discuss things. And then typically people end up doing what we describe as overthinking, because when you can't emote, it stays inside. If you're not, just why journaling can help, or having a conversation with somebody helps, because when you have those conversations, when you express how you're feeling, whether that's in a crying physical way, or whether it's in a verbal way, or a written way, it helps you to get a better understanding of what's going on for you, and then your brain can process it, and it's not just churning over and over and over. People spend so much time overthinking, thinking the same things over and over and over, and emotions help us to express that. Emotions help us to reach out.
So men should cry as well.
Men should absolutely cry. Yeah, I was at a Radio 4 production the other day.
Yeah.
And there was a Radio 4 presenter was being interviewed, and he cried, I think, 4 times during the interview, and it was a moving, important, vital conversation. And the times that he cried weren't necessarily because he was sad. Sometimes they were happy occasions he was talking about. Sometimes he talked about his parents and he cried. He talked about his dog and he cried. His emotions were very, very close to the surface, and that sort of emotional dysregulation or having that bubbling at the surface is totally fine. It's as long as it doesn't get in your way. If it's really holding you back and stopping you accomplishing things, then there are things that you can do to improve your emotional regulation.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense actually. So if you remember, I was talking to you the other day and telling you this World Cup cricket of women, and where I was stunned and extremely impressed with the way the star performer Jemima came up and sat in front of the print and media, said, "I do cry," and she cried out loud, very clear, and explained how she went through all that anxiety and all that stuff. She's a star performer. She made India win the World Cup, but still she can have that emotion. So how do you reflect on this? How important is it for people who are successful to come out? I mean, it don't have to be press and media, but at least to the closest nets, your team or your people around you. How important is this because there is this myth again that successful people will not have problems. You know what I'm saying, right? So
I think it's vital. I think it's a really good sign that people can now be more open about their emotions, that they can be that they can emote more openly. and that the response to it is much more positive than it used to be.
Yeah.
And that it's no longer necessarily perceived as a weakness as it used to be. And I think it's incredibly valuable. One of the most valuable things that we see in workplaces is when you have very senior leaders who represent, who go and be in these sort of employee network groups. Often you'll have senior leadership team, and they won't play any part in these employee network groups. But it's a really great opportunity to explain that even the people in the most senior positions are affected by the same things. So they might be in the employee network group for carers because they're caring for a member of their family, or it might be that they're neurodivergent, they have ADHD or ASD, or that they have that going on in their families, that perhaps they're perimenopausal, so they're in an employee network group supporting people with those experiences. That's all so important that you have people from every level of an organisation taking part, and we see that that's the time when people are most inclusive. That's the time when organisations are most inclusive. And there was some brilliant research from the Boston Consulting Group that showed that when your managers are inclusive, burnout is halved.
Amazing. Yeah,
so,
I know about what you're talking about, the BCG research report. But I also want to bring out about Howard Gardner, multiple intelligences theory. That's what he did.
Yes.
Yeah, and you also did some of the research in King's. You're from King's College. You studied in King's, and you also did Cambridge work in the Cambridge area as well.
I did coaching at Cambridge.
And
I did
so what I wanted to ask you is this multiple intelligence theory or emotional intelligence and all this stuff. When you were doing all this research, if you can bring out one or two examples of case studies that you have seen surprised you and actually changed your perspective through.
I haven't done research into multiple intelligences. That's not something that I've seen.
EQ
the research.
maybe.
I've seen the research. And unfortunately, I think the challenge with that is that there's not a lot of research backing it up. But I certainly do see that IQ, for example, is a very limited type of way of measuring intelligence. So historically we've measured intelligence by doing certain types of quizzes, and we've said if you're very good at answering these sorts of questions that we ask in the IQ test, then you're intelligent. And if you're not very good at doing those things, then you're not intelligent. And if you're very good at answering maths questions, you're intelligent. And if you're not very good at maths questions, then you're not intelligent. And so we lump people together into these groups of intelligent or not. And actually, if you look at the dictionary definition of intelligence, the definition of intelligence is the ability to acquire and apply knowledge.
Yeah.
And so there's an awful lot of people who are very good at acquiring knowledge, but not very good at applying it at all. Which would then suggest that they're not using intelligence. But they wouldn't want to be told that. And similarly, there's a lot of people who didn't do very well at school. Look at Richard Branson. Did terribly at school.
Stunning.
Dyslexia, ADHD. Absolute key example of somebody who did not do well in the measures of intelligence that were measured at school.
So if you go by the book, then you would have been failure.
Yes.
I mean, in a general sense, I'm talking about the world, the way you look at it, but look at Richard today.
Yes, exactly.
Such an inspiring
and so when you let people use their strengths, I'm a huge proponent of people using their strengths. And in fact, if we can, I'll put a little link in the comments to a strengths questionnaire that people could do. It's really helpful to understand what your strengths are, and to use that to really optimize how you function. And there's so much that you can do.
Let's add that to the questionnaire to the episode. Let's do that. But it's very interesting you're bringing all that stuff into the conversation, because at workplaces now, let's focus on the workplaces for a minute. So at workplaces, people tend to kind of get judged on certain things. Absolutely. You have this, there may be a process, you have your evaluations year-end or mid-year. There may be exceptionally talented person, but being rated very low in the performance evaluations.
Right, yes.
So how do you look at this? How should firms be more inclusive in in understanding the intellect of the people. And I think leadership needs to bring some changes, right? I mean, most of the companies. And you mentioned about BCG's study, and I've also looked at other consulting groups who did a lot of study in the inclusive workplaces.
Yes.
And how it will change the entire thing. I mean, the Google story, you probably have heard about, like the success story of Google in terms of bringing and the
Psychological safety.
psychological
Yes,
safety,
super
absolutely.
interesting.
Yeah.
Product Aristotle.
Yeah, you know this guy, Dragon's Den guy, the barn. He also he posted a role recently. I mean, not recently, probably 3 months back. Head of happiness as a role in the company.
I saw that.
You saw that?
Yeah, I saw
It's amazing, stunning. I immediately messaged him and said, amazing thought. I mean, forget about whether he brings it and every firm does it or not, but at least thinking about, like, there is an element of happiness. There's commerce, absolutely fine, but there's also happiness. And I was talking to you the other day, remember? Like I was telling, there is powerful countries in the economy, they're not powerful in the happiness index. So there's a lot of disparity. So how do you reflect in terms of the leadership bringing inclusion as a top priority?
I think it's vital, not just for reducing burnout, but even if you were just thinking about it from a financial perspective, if you were just thinking about what should we do to make our business more profitable, make it more inclusive, because that will make it more profitable, because people are less burnt out and they perform better. If you're inclusive and you're talking about things like psychological safety, the stuff that was discussed and found to be so effective in the teams at Google, it's a very similar concept to something called organizational trust, which neuroscientist Paul Zak talks about. And we find that engagement is much higher. Absenteeism drops. People are more productive. They get more done in less time. They feel better. A workplace will just work better if there are high levels of trust, high levels of inclusion. And to me, I also saw that the job, the head of happiness thing, which I thought was super interesting. I actually sent him an email and said, I think you also need a head of brain health. And I genuinely think that it would be really interesting to have chief brain officers in organisations that are looking at, well, what are all the ways that brains are being affected by the things that are going on, and that intersects with your chief marketing officer and your chief people officer and your CEO. All of these things, they're all about influencing brains, and yet nobody's talking about it. So there's a brain-shaped gap in the workplace that people are just missing, and it's like the elephant in the room.
Yeah, the big elephant in the room. Yeah,
huge, but nobody's paying attention.
So
and
true.
just by paying attention to what we can do to make brains feel included will be so impactful. And increasingly there's a term neuro-inclusion, which used to be or is primarily designed for making workplaces that are more inclusive for people who are neurodivergent, which is about 20-25% of the population. So it's meaningful. But I would really like to see that concept of neuro-inclusion widened, broadened, so that people start thinking about, what can I do to make every brain feel included? What can I do to make an organisation more brain friendly, more brain healthy, so that everybody's unique brain can function at its best in the workplace?
So
whether that's, and if you do that, if you improve brain health across your organisation, you won't just see a reduction in burnout. You'll see an improvement in mental health. You'll see an improvement in
it's efficient as well.
Concentrating. Emotions will be better. Behaviours will be better.
So true.
It's absolutely critical, and it's being missed. But I'm very grateful to you.
Absolutely.
To share it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the statement comes out from that conversation very clearly is being inclusive is actually profitable. Being inclusive is not charity. Being inclusive is actually more effective for your organization itself. It's better for you to do it that way. So that, and I also love the concept that you brought about CBOs, like chief brain officers, because I'll tell you a quick story. I mean, I'll not take much time there, but a few years back, I'm also a motivation speaker. I go to colleges and speak, right? So I went to one of the very prominent colleges in India called IITs, Indian Institute of Technologies, NITs, National Institute of Technology, where the cream of the country comes in, like the top scored students comes into the colleges, right? Per the standards of intelligence, they are the most intelligent people according to the world standards of intelligence, right? So I went into this session. I was speaking about my story, and I'll tell you all that stuff later. But I had this conversation with 200 students who are known to be the top 200 of the country, right? So after that, I finished my talk, 40 minutes, was coming out. A girl comes up to me and say, "Can I speak to you for 5 minutes?" I said, "Yes." So we went into a private space, where because she wanted to convey something. And I said, "Okay, let's talk now. It's absolutely safe place. You can say whatever you want to say." And she said, if I wasn't in this conversation for 40 minutes, I'm prepared to die today. I'm prepared for suicide. And there are multiple reasons why she wants to die. And she expressed all that stuff to me and said, if it was not for you, if it was not for this 40 minutes conversation, story would have been completely different. My story would have ended at age of 20, being a suicidal child. However, after this conversation, I have a different perspective. My question to you now is, I don't want to get into extreme details of that, but the intelligence versus how you read your brain is extremely different and important, right? How do you think it's important for people to open that doors up so that, the suicidal tendencies or depression can come down? What do you think, if you have to top 3 line items, what should leaders do to kind of reduce the stress? Or what should education do to reduce the stress?
My number one thing that I would like to see educational establishments and workplaces doing is educating people about their brain, so they understand, A, it's changing all the time, B, it can change for the better or it can change for the worse depending on what you do, and you can strengthen it at any age so that it does more of the things that you wanted to do. So
and it's fine to not to perform at times.
And absolutely.
Yeah.
That you learn, your brain is learning, and you learn more from the things that you get wrong than the things that you get right. Always. You learn more.
Yeah.
So the first thing I think would be educate people about their brain, and then make environments where brains can function better. So at the moment we have workplaces where you have 3-hour meetings. It's toxic.
Doesn't make any sense.
Where people are still being employed and told that they have to multitask. Multitasking fractures your brain. It splinters your attention, and it stops you being able to function. People function much better. The research
when they're
shows
focused.
you make more errors. You get more stressed. Why are we encouraging people to do this? So we need to encourage people to do one thing at a time, to monotask. Then a third thing, I think, the destigmatization is so important. Destigmatization and inclusion, just recognizing that every brain is completely unique. Everybody is unique, and everybody will have their own unique challenges and their own unique strengths. And by focusing more on strengths, then people have a much greater chance to thrive. I really liked what Martin Seligman did in positive psychology, where he saw that psychology had been all about what's wrong with people. And he wanted to understand, well, what happens when they're happy, and what does that look like, and could we model it and make them happier? And I very much like to do the same thing with neuroscience. So people talk a lot about brain health things being bad, dementia or memory lapses, and I want to talk about focus and what can we do to help people focus and help people to thrive and be more engaged and to perform at their best regardless of what's going on. So it doesn't matter if you're menopausal, it doesn't matter if you've got ADHD and you're caring for people and you're autistic or your child's autistic, and all of these things are happening to everybody. They're happening all of the time to everybody. But what can we do to keep our own brains and the brains around us healthier, happier, sharper for longer, so that despite all of the things that we're all going through, we can still thrive. We can still live our best lives.
Amazing. This conversation can go on and on. I know you have to go and attend at, Naomi is so kind. She's actually going and attending King's workshop today at King's College, but she happened to come to our studio and do this. So, but yeah, I want to close with one quick thoughts, Naomi, that, is there any book for people to kind of, any book that you want to recommend for people to kind of, beginners especially, want to understand brain? And number two is there anything that you should think people would do a short-term one, like, 1 week, I can see some results or something of that sort? Is there anything that you can suggest?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So in terms of a book about the brain generally, there's a book called 7.5 Lessons About the Brain by Lisa Feldman Barrett, which is very short but brilliant.
7.5 lessons
about the brain. Yeah,
about
I'll put a link. There is she's done some brilliant podcasts. If people prefer a podcast or a video rather than a book, then that's brilliant too. In terms of what was the second thing you asked about?
In a week, if I have to see changes, what are the few things that I can do to see changes?
Connect with people, even if it's uncomfortable. Really make a habit of having a connection, because we talked about the impact of isolation. It's really, really impactful. There are things that you can do that improve your focus, like spending time under trees, spending time in green spaces. Changes the way
just do nothing. But
being in green spaces, getting out, moving, sleep. I heard somebody say the other day, sleep like it's your job, and I loved that. I can't remember whoever it was.
Sleep for 8 hours.
That's great. Sleep like it's your job. Focus on sleep, because when you sleep, everything else is easy. But it's not easy for everybody. If you've got a sleepless child, or you're caring for somebody and they're not sleeping, you're not sleeping. So then you have to do so many more things to try and make up for it. But what you eat matters. How much you sleep matters. Who you spend time with matters. These things are constantly changing your brain, and the more good that you do, the better your brain will be.
And the impact is significant with this small changes, but significant. Amazing, Naomi. Thank you so much. But a few things stood out really, really strong from the conversation for me is, that chief brain officers thing. I think leadership, you have to think about it. Please. And happiness index in the firms needs to be measured as well. So it's not about only your profit lines. Yes, your profits will be amazing when your employees are happy, right? That's one more line I want to pick it up. But one more most important thing out of this conversation, Naomi, I loved it, is you can fail. It's absolutely fine to fail. And you may be a superstar. You may be a superstar doing exceptional well in your career, wherever you are. At times you do fail, which is absolutely fine. And don't judge yourself too much. What happens is in the world is there is so many people already judging you. But unfortunately, people started judging themselves too much these days. So, am I good enough? You are absolutely good. You are stunning. Every one of you, each of you are pearl, gem, diamonds. So don't worry. You may be doing some things good. You may be doing not so good in some areas, which is absolutely fine, right? The sprinters, even Usain Bolt may not be playing cricket. So don't worry, right? Usain Bolt doesn't play cricket. I may be better cricketer than Usain Bolt. So, but he's a star in one area. Just recognize that. You're amazing stars in one area. Just focus on that area and grow. Hope you agree to that statement.
I love that. I love it. Absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
And grow your brain.
Grow your brain and focus on your brain. Understand your brain and give some time to your brain. So it takes care of you really well. Thank you so much, Naomi. She's Applied Neuroscientist. I'll share the details of Naomi in the comments as well. Do watch out on various things that Naomi does. But I'll also look out for the books that you mentioned about. We will have to go through that as well, Naomi. But yeah, we'll see again. We'll probably come back again, discuss more about brain in future. But thank you so much. Lovely to have you in the studio.
So much.
It's amazing. Any final words to the audience, if you want to say?
Grow your brain, strengthen your brain, keep it healthier, happier, sharper for longer. Learn everything you can about it and look after it, because you're going to need it.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much, Naomi. See you guys again. Thank you.